if I do rants on games, do I have to do them all over again in the series? You know, it's almost like a YouTube order. Knowing that I plan on telling him to go fuck himself, yet I still tell him to go fuck himself. Now, within the past year, I already did a video on Bioshock Infinite, and actually I believe it was used in the background of a question and answer session. I think I got like 3 or 4 questions on Bioshock itself, and like, whatever, man. It's been used, it's the same shit before. But before I begin, what you're going to see in the background, there isn't much action footage at all. Since I started a new game for some reason, it doesn't allow me to load chapters from my prior save date. I wasn't about to play 40 minutes just to get 15 minutes of footage, so I basically took the beginning of the game and I called it a day. Now, Bioshock Infinite was actually made by the original people who made the first Bioshock, not Bioshock 2. And they came up with a brand new setting, and instead of Rapture, they decided to go in the complete opposite direction from an underwater city. They went to a floating city in the sky, held up by gigantic balloons, quantum physics, or whatever the fuck those creepy-ass twins thought of. And much like its 2 predecessors, it's a damn good game. You can't go wrong with any of the Bioshock games, although I would steer people away from Part 2 since that really isn't a sequel, that's more of like a spin-off, as I mentioned yesterday. And people are going to wonder, why the fuck did I play that shit? I ain't gonna get to that shit, man. Now, oddly enough, this was the first Bioshock game that I played immediately after buying it. I mentioned in the first video that I bought the original Bioshock. It sat on my shelf for months while I played Resistance 2. I got Bioshock 2 in the year Modern Warfare 2 was in style, and I didn't actually play that game either until after I got bored with Modern Warfare 2. So I would say that sat on my shelf for a good 5 or 6 months. But with Infinite, I played it immediately. This time around, there was no other game that I was invested in like the prior 2. And seeing that this series produced some quality games, I was not going to delay playing this game this time around. So as soon as I got it, I was playing this bitch. And Infinite is a great game on its own. You're Booker DeWitt trying to save a girl named Elizabeth. Pretty fucking simple, right? Yeah, if only games were that fucking easy, man. Fuck, man, even Mario, he had to go to 8 castles to finally find the fucking princess. After finding Toad 7 fucking times, he finally gets to it. Now, on a side note, I just want to rant about this for a second. How useless was Toad? No, really, this fucking guy either got captured 7 times in the game and he was brought to Bowser's castles, or he managed to get his ass all the way to the end of Bowser's shit looking for the princess, and he just sits there. Come on, man. You mean to tell me you couldn't make your way back out of the castle and let me know before I got there that the princess wasn't even in there? Shit, you couldn't even tell a motherfucker you were going to World 5 castles, man, so that I wouldn't have to go my damn self. Man, he was one seriously useless cocksucker, man. But anyway, let's get back into Bioshock. Bioshock Infinite gives you a somewhat straightforward story, and for the most part, it's like any other shooting game where you constantly move from one part of the map to another, and I have to be honest, the gameplay and the logic behind the action isn't anything different from any other shooter. It isn't. You find Elizabeth early in the game, and you spend the rest of the game trying to find a way off this magical floating city, going from one idea to the next, to the next, to the next. Of course, the game does throw unique elements your way, in which shows that Bioshock is a different game, and that's what sets it apart from all the other generic shooters out there. It throws in your normal Mook level enemies that you can kill pretty quickly, and some boss level type characters that will piss you off. That fucking handyman fight was a bitch, especially when you weren't expecting that shit. You see, that's what the Big Daddy fights should have been like, and chances are, Irrational Studios listened very closely to the critiques of the Big Daddy from the first game, and they made Handyman a badass motherfucker that was hard to kill. The Big Daddy AI was relatively stupid and just charged straight ahead at you. Handyman charges at you, but from completely different angles, and that's a huge improvement. Now, in Bioshock games, you have magic powers and shit. In this game, they happen to call it Vigors or whatever the fuck it is. First 2 games, they called it Plasms. Whatever, man. You need to use those shits against enemies, but this time, you actually need to use your gun. In the first 2 Bioshocks, you could melee your way to the end of that game without too many issues. First game, you could use Shock and wrench the whole game. Second game was Shock and that drill dash by the Big Daddy. In Infinite, no way in hell. You actually have to shoot, and you have to be pretty damn accurate with your shots. So this game feels more in line with shooter games than the prior Bioshock games. Sure, you could use your powers and whatnot, but guns finally have a purpose. You can't win this game solely using your melee, and you need to find a good balance of gunplay, vigors, accuracy, and the melee. As you progress through the story, you get all the background info on the characters, you get your explanation behind the floating city, and of course, we get the ending of Bioshock Infinite, which pretty much carried this game to its grand status. Now, I like the game. I love the ending, don't get me wrong. But without that ending, without the way the game progressed to that ending, it was an otherwise above average game. No, really, What about this storyline sets it apart other than the ending needed to explain the importance of Elizabeth and why Booker was the character that needed to get to her? The gameplay was good. Elizabeth was probably the greatest NPC assistant character I have ever seen in the game because you didn't need to protect her ass and she gave you extra ammo, health and shit. And on top of that, the enemies you had to fight had a good variety to make you use different tactics. So the gameplay itself was fine and the storyline itself was great with Elizabeth opening up all the portals to wherever she wanted to go. That became part of the story and the solution to the entire conflict. But without that ending, does this game enter the Game of the Year conversation? Not with Grand Theft Auto 5 and The Last of Us released in the same year. This story needs that ending to be part of the conversation for Game of the Year, where the other two games are not dependent on just one scene to pull the whole game together. Yes, this game has a much better ending than the other two games, and it carefully tells the story to lead you up to that point. But you need to play 10 plus hours to get that magical scene. Other games give you amazing scenes and stories throughout their games that keeps you intrigued, where Bioshock Infinite saves all their surprises and twists for the finale. You know, I don't fault the writers for creating this sort of Fight Club deal where you build up to the finale and the final reveal is a holy shit kind of moment. Those are great stories, but unfortunately, the downside is that you take a while to build up to that moment. In those hours it takes you to build up to that, stories like The Last of Us have 5 to 6 holy shit moments. That doesn't take away from the storyline of Infinite. They wanted that grand finale surprise, but when a story manages to sneak in multiple moments of shock and awe, that will sometimes trump your grand finale. The Last of Us did that. Now, a couple of other minor points that I have to mention about this game. One is Songbird. I'm not gonna lie, I was disappointed that you never really faced off against Songbird. I thought that motherfucker was badass, and you get to at least control him during the final battle. But much like the Big Daddy, you created an iconic character who is meant to defend someone in the game. Yet, all you do is run away from it and never stand your ground. I would have liked at least one battle against him, because in a game like this, you want to take on the biggest challenge in the game. Songbird would have been that challenge, but we never got that. We got Handyman as the badass battle to begin with, but Songbird was the top motherfucker. And I also want to commend Irrational for not tacking on multiplayer. When they announced this game had no multiplayer, people wondered why. And it's simple. It didn't fit the storyline. I'm glad they said fuck you to multiplayer, because it's not something that fits what this story created. Sure, they could have tacked it on, they could have come up with a peripheral reason to use it, but Irrational wanted to focus on the story, and I have to commend them for being a company that stuck to their guns and they said, you know what, we're not adding multiplayer just to make it seem like we have an ongoing process to make money. Which, by the way, I think that they must have rewrote this story so many fucking times. Because if you look at the reveal trailer of Bioshock Infinite compared to the end game, you see so many things that change. You know, from Elizabeth not having telekinesis to Handyman being her protector instead of Songbird. They had all kinds of shit different from the initial reveal to what actually happened in the game. Another thing about this game, it received some unfair criticism for racial issues. Come on, man, really? I mean, really? People had the nerve to complain about that shit? For starters, the time period in the game was well before civil rights ever occurred. Shit, the time period is still before women had any goddamn rights. So naturally, they kept things in line with the time period of that time. That's not racially insensitive. That's not racially motivated. That's just fucking reality. Shit happened back in the day. Shit happened that looked awful 100 years later. But there's no reason to sugarcoat that shit, especially in a mature rated game. Those who call that irrational for racial insensitivities really need to pull their head out of their ass over that shit. That is just total fucking bullshit, man. The game was not about racial issues. It took effect in the background of the story because that's what happened during that time frame period. It is that fucking simple. Now, the last thing to mention is that for some strange reason, Irrational decided to close their doors and end the company. I can't fucking understand this shit. The CEO just decided, you know what? Close up shop. And he's going to create a smaller company to focus on smaller games that aren't the large-scale budget busters that we have nowadays with the AAA games. Now, I have no clue if this motherfucker lost his damn mind. I don't know what. Maybe he just wants to do small games. I don't know. I don't care. But here's the thing. There will be no more Bioshock games from Irrational Studios. Irrational is completely closed. 2K Marin, the group that did Bioshock 2, is going to be taking over the series. Hopefully they don't do Bioshock Infinite 2, which would be incredibly fucking stupid. But Bioshock 2, although, like I said, it wasn't as good as the other two and it has its flaws, they did make a pretty good game. So hopefully Bioshock is in good hands and they're able to make a pretty decent follow-up to this game, but they're definitely not going to be able to follow up with Bioshock Infinite 2. I swear to God, if they make Bioshock Infinite 2, somebody needs to kick them in the ass. Anyways, Bioshock is a great series of games and probably some of the best storylines to watch and play. Combine that with the artwork that captures the time periods that they're going for, with the elements of RPG, survival horror, puzzles. You have an amazing franchise. For those of you who haven't, go play these games. No bullshit. It is definitely worth your time to play the original Bioshock, to play Bioshock Infinite. If you're feeling froggy, go ahead and jump into Bioshock 2. But this is an excellent franchise, an excellent series, and I highly recommend it to anybody who wants to try a different game out there. So anyway, as always, rate, comment, subscribe, and all that good shit, and I'll see you guys in tomorrow's video.